So what happened as you were wrapping up this novel is truly awful, but I think that's the best place to start out. Last April, tell us what happened, first of all.
Well, I was writing, as I do in the mornings, finishing up this book, and my brother phoned me, and he was in tears, and he said, "She's dead, Paula's dead." And I thought at first, because he and I talk in movie language, I thought he was quoting something. I had no idea what he was doing.
It's hard to process in that moment.
Yeah, you're not prepared. I'm prepared for bad news at the doctor. I'm prepared for a car accident, but I'm not prepared for the story he told me, which is she was murdered in the night.
How is your brother coping now?
Well, he's getting better. It's a terrible thing. Again, we're not trained for it. So it was the moment in his life was when he had been through a divorce and he was having a tricky time. And suddenly this fairy tale romance with
I should clarify, sorry, for our listeners. Paula was your brother's girlfriend.
Yeah, they were going to buy a house together and bring their children. They had 5 children in total. They were going to have this Brady Bunch future. It was a lovely time. And this was all interrupted in one night.
Tell us a bit about Paula. What do you remember about her?
Well, she was unusually lovely. Say at Christmas time, the first time we spent Christmas together, we would buy a couple of little things, and she would buy us and our daughters 100 things. It was almost embarrassing how much of a giving person she was. Her and my brother on places like Facebook were just gooey and ridiculous with each other. They were so in love. So they were emotionally open people that were almost disarmingly cute with their love for one another.
And this murder happened last April. What's the status of the case now?
Gosh, I wish I knew. They haven't picked up or charged or even suspected anyone publicly.
So this terrible tragedy strikes in your family. How did that change your understanding of violence as far as your own writing?
Well, I'd grown up paying attention to violence, obviously. I borrowed from myself for Christopher Cruz when I was about 14. I was beaten up. And my parents responded not by telling the principal to fix this problem in the school, but by taking me to martial arts schools. So I started from the time I was 14 for the next many years. It was my thing to learn how to fight. And when I started writing, I thought, well, I can borrow from that experience. And Christopher Cruz is one of the characters I gave that to. And I wanted to make sure he was in the self-defense business. But what I know from my heart and from meeting a lot of people in that world is, if you're in self-defense, it's a nice thing to say self-defense, but you're really in it because you were hurt once, and the next time someone wants to hurt you, you're going to destroy them. That is the instinct we have, and all of that plus the fact that as far back as we go as storytellers and as readers, we've been obsessed with violence. Murder is a part of almost every moving story we tell, at least the threat of it.
And you've been on this very personal journey of trying to understand violence.
I want to be responsible about it, especially since last April, where I was obsessed with being empathetic. And your intro was lovely. The way that Cruz sees violence, especially after the death of his wife and daughter, is different. He feels he has a responsibility, and he thinks, if you're going to be someone who hurts other people, you're moving into a realm where you might be damned or cursed. And he understands that, and I think if someone dies in Son of France or Come Barbarians, the novel that came before, it has implications. It echoes out into communities.
There's so much to unpack here. I want to talk firstly about before this murder that happened in your life. How did you understand violence in other stories that you read or watched?
Well, I was thrilled by them, those stories. I think violence is at the core of what it means to be a human being, and I was certainly most attracted as a young person to thrillers, even slasher films. And the reason I started writing crime books a few years ago was I was just reading so many of them and trying to find a balance for me between literary and crime is what I've been doing for the last little while. But, if you go back to the oldest story humans ever wrote, the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's about violence. The main character, his best friend is killed. Through that process, we become more human somehow, knowing that we're always at risk every single day. And I think there's something in the entertainment that allows us to feel safe when someone else is going through that. So we're not obsessed nightly about the danger that faces us every day.
Yeah. You revised this book after this murder happened. What was that process like for you, going back and rereading this novel and thinking about what you need to change?
Well, a novelist is an empathy machine. I just wanted to go back to scenes where there were hurt people, there was violence, there was murder, and make sure that especially Christopher Cruz understands the implications of what's happening. And so I wanted him to be, in the early part of the novel especially, reluctant about what he has to do. His business partner and mentor, he has a background in Mossad. He's all for doing this. It's a bad person they have to go out and find. Ethically, he's absolutely fine with it. Whereas Christopher is not fine at all with it. And that reluctance causes huge problems, frankly, in the book. But it's a reluctance, I think, that he feels spiritually he can live with.
And that's the main thing that you changed.
The main thing is just making sure if anyone is hurt that my main character understands and feels it and lives with it and carries the burden of it.
I'm curious about your personal journey from being a teenager and learning self-defense to getting into these novels. What have you learned about violence and masculinity?
Gosh, I think it's at the core of what being a man is, unfortunately. And I've tried to explore it. I think Christopher Cruz, the way he's like me, is in a way that, on the spectrum between 10 man and 1 woman, or 10 women and 1 man, I'm in the middle somehow. And my friends would call me sort of a feminine gent in lots of ways. So I've been interested in violence. I've been interested in the notion of self-defense. I've been interested in the notion of being hurt and hurting for a long time. And I think the way that men negotiate that, especially at this time in our culture, is fascinating to me. And I've just watched growing up and especially becoming a man, I've watched people around me react to this so awkwardly, and people don't know what it is to be a man anymore, which is, for a novelist, I think, just a wonderful opportunity to play with the notion.
Is there anything that you've come to an understanding of as far as what that means? I mean, the reason why I'm asking about masculinity and violence is we've done a few stories on the show about violence against women in the music industry, in the arts sort of world especially, and spoken with a lot of women. But there's kind of a big question mark, which is where this comes from in men, the violence and what it means. And
for a while, I was the lightest and smallest bouncer in North America. And it was fun to be in a bar watching men do what men do, especially when they're drinking. They become this strange version of themselves. And starting to see how many of them would turn violent by the end of the night was a game I played. And it was always about 20%. 20% of them would be shouting and pushing and being birds walking around, cock of the walking. And having to deal with that was tricky and fun and interesting. But what I saw more than anything was it was pretending. Men felt they had to find this role for themselves over the course of the night. They didn't really want to fight. They didn't really want to hurt anyone or be hurt, but they felt they had to enact something for each other. Maybe they thought it was attractive to women. I'm not sure, but sociologically, it was a lot of fun to watch. And I think that was a key moment for me.
I mean, for you, you talk about not really being an inherently violent person, but you had these experiences of being picked on. Do you think that's part of what's at the core of it with some of these guys you observed?
Oh, sure. I think much of the problems that happen to men are about confidence. And if something happens to you at a young age or even older, you're humiliated, you're beat up, it's awful, you're bloody, someone's standing over you, that power dynamic that is icky. Women know it better than men. I think what you want to do is avoid that again. And you build fantasies in your mind. If that were to happen again, I'll be prepared in this way. And I did that way more than most people, but it's allowed me, I think, to borrow it, use it for my novels.
Yeah, do you think it's been good for you to engage with that from the self-defense? And
it has been, and I think, I grew up in kind of a rough town, and I could have gone in many directions. Starting with self-defense and getting the confidence, physical confidence, was really useful for me. I don't think I had to pretend later on. There's a quiet confidence you get around violence later on if you understand it, rather than walking up and down the busy bar streets as a 22-year-old man where you're going to get picked on, you might react stupidly, and people can get hurt. I never had to deal with that. I sort of understood it because I'd played with it so much.
Was it difficult to overcome the temptation to play with it like once you had that ability?
Oh, I did stupid stuff, absolutely, in my teen years. But I don't think I ever started a fight. I probably could have waited a little longer to have that fight interrupted or stopped or talked my way out of it or walked away. I wasn't a walk away type. I would stand there and try to freak them out, that sort of thing. That was stupid.
You talked about going back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, our obsession with violence and violence in our stories. Are you still drawn to stories of violence after what's happened in your family?
I can't stop it. I was thinking the other night when I got into Toronto, I turned on the TV, and I hardly ever get to watch TV. And one of the Die Hards was on Die Hard 7 or something. And the bad guys walked into a room and just ping, 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 shot a bunch of people. The people said, "What are you doing here?" And they shot them all. And they didn't feel a thing. They just moved them out of the way and plinked into the computer to blow up the world or whatever they're doing. And when I see that now, I just think it's lazy and it's weak and it's inhuman. It's not actually true. I don't believe anyone kills another person and then walks away completely unaffected. And if they do, I'm just not interested in that side of humanity. And so there's a storytelling, I think, responsibility you have to understand the hugeness of taking someone's life. And that's what if I'm going to write crime novels, I want that to echo through the book so that the readers understand it and that they are moved by it in some way, the way I am.
The Paris attacks also happened after you wrote your book, and you've lived in France. Your thrillers are set there. What impact did those attacks have on you?
Well, the night it happened, I felt a bit like a ghoul, like, oh my gosh, I'm exploiting something, or people will think I'm exploiting something. But the fact is, the explosion at the beginning of Son of France, there's an explosion in a Jewish neighborhood in Paris. I borrowed that from real life, something that happened in the 1980s. So I was already doing it to a degree. So if you feel like you're exploiting someone's pain, I was doing it doubly, perhaps, there, or feeling like I am. And even talking to you about what happened in my family feels like I'm exploiting something. But it has given me a new eye into crime and into what it truly does to people. I think we lead with it in our news. We hear it every day. Now I understand it, and I don't think I did before. I understood it as a reader, as a trained writer, but I don't think I really understood what murder means.
What's your new understanding?
Well, it's probably something that's at the core of religion that I never got, but that you're ruined forever when you do that. The community is ruined, the family is ruined, and the people who do it, they understand that. They understand that when you go through that experience, you murder someone, you're actually murdering 20 or 30 or 100 or 150,000 people. And the hugeness of it is what I understand now.
And we have this long history, as long as human history almost, of trying to understand violence and understand murder through story. How has story helped you and your brother cope with the murder in your family?
Gosh, I'm not sure it does. Nothing has helped. I wished, that's what I was thinking about. I've spent my life reading and writing, and I'd wished I could have pulled wisdom out of all of that reading, but I really couldn't. I was even thinking of, our religions are based on murder, on suffering, on death, and how we respond to it. There was really nothing I could say, and there is nothing I can say to my brother to make him feel better about this. Revenge is a small, superficial thought. Nothing helps because we all, he does especially, return to that night again and again and again. He will forever. And the meaning of it is it paralyzes us. And there's no way I can help him. I'm not a professional in that realm either, but not even the professionals have been able to help him get past that, and they never will.
That's surprising to hear. With all that reservoir of stories you must have in your mind, there is just nothing to pull from. Wow.
It's why we continue writing them. It's why we continue trying. It's why I think we're entertained by crime novels, and we maybe don't know why we're doing it, but there is no greater curse in humanity than beginning that story with a dead person. We want to keep going because we want some resolution. And the great special opportunity I have in writing a novel is I can find resolution. And the problem is in most of our lives, whenever this happens, and I'm so pleased it's rare, there is none. There's no resolution. No one feels better the day after the guilty verdict.
Finally, Todd, before I let you go, how do you imagine this will change Christopher Cruz as you continue to write these stories?
Well, he's a haunted guy already. I wanted him to be a haunted guy. The great thing about him is he can think carefully about this. He can build up his own humanity through these experiences. He can suffer. He can be cursed. He can be damned by it. And I can inject all the meaning that I'm finding and all the confusion and all the questioning about crime into him. I can use him to explore what you and I are exploring right now, because I think as a people, we do it awkwardly, which is a huge opportunity for writers.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.